Neil Grammer from Dialogue Strategies, and today I want to talk to you about how do you become a more consistently influential, persuasive communicator and communicate your ideas with far greater conviction. So think about this situation. We've all been there. You're in a meeting and somebody's telling you something like the new org chart, and the senior VP is telling you that Division X in Chicago is not going to be reporting to Division Y in New York, and Susan and Jack are now going to be reporting into Bob and Mary, and so forth and so on. And you're sitting there in that meeting, and if you're like most normal people, probably this little voice starts pinging away the back of your brain, and you start asking yourself, what does this have to do with me? Why should I care? Or most importantly, the question I always lean on is, so what? And so what is the most fundamentally critical question that we need to be answering from our listeners' perspective if we want to consistently be persuasive, credible, and influential. So here's the interesting thing about the concept of so what. When we are going into a meeting, perhaps you're presenting a project to get funded, and you're going into a senior level executive to get that funding. Most people are thinking about the so what, quite frankly, from their perspective. In other words, I hope I get the funding because if this project is really a success, I will get very high level of promotions, I will be recognized, I will feel really great about my value add to the organization. And you should be thinking those things because that's what motivates people to prepare and know their content inside and out. But think about that senior VP and what is his or her so what? In other words, why should they care about the project? And so if you want to be consistently persuasive, we have to be much more cognizant about our listeners' so what. So when you think about why should people care about anything, here's what I've found out. There's only 4 reasons why anyone will care about anything that you might propose to them. And when you're in a meeting or a presentation, if what you're proposing doesn't satisfy one or a combination of these 4 things, your argument will likely not be as persuasive and relevant. So what are the 4 things? Well, here they are. Number 1, is this going to help us or somebody we care about make or save money? Number 2, does this help us or someone we care about save time? Number 3, is this going to make us, me, some stakeholder of mine, look good? And number 4, is this going to make me, stakeholder, feel good? So here's what's really interesting about framing an argument. Most arguments tend to cover off numbers 1 and 2. The make money, save time, those are classic business so what's, easy. But here's what I've learned when people make a decision. You know what, Sue, I'm going to give you the funding for that project. When that person has made that decision, in almost every instance, they've arrived at that conclusion because of numbers 3 and 4. This is going to make me look good, and this is going to make me feel good. They justify their decision on the basis of numbers 1 and 2. So the challenge I put to you when you're going into one of these meetings is, do you know your listeners' so what? What is it that's going to make them look good if they say yes to you, or feel good if they say yes to you? And one of those things is, how will they best be able to justify their yes to somebody even more senior than them? So what I find really interesting is this. People will sometimes think about the so what. Very few of them, quite frankly, from their listeners' perspective. Even fewer people will actually explicitly articulate the so what. And I'll give you a really good example of what I mean. I do a lot of work with my clients on specific pitches. And one that I was working on with one of my banking clients, they were going in to pitch for a very large mandate that would have resulted in significant fees. And it was so important that they brought in one of their vice chairmen to participate in the pitch. And this guy was going to do the conclusion of the pitch because he had the gravitas and the seniority to do it. And so we did a dry run, and his pitch, his conclusion was as follows. He said this: we have the knowledge, the experience, and the resources to get this transaction done, and that's why we should be leading the mandate. Well, all the people around the table were nodding their heads in affirmation because he was their boss. And I was sitting at the front of the table, and I said, you have knowledge, experience, and resources. So what? And everybody was taken aback because I challenged the vice chairman. But my point was as follows. First of all of your competitors have knowledge, experience, and resources. So that isn't going to be a differentiator. Secondly, if I, the listener, could still say, so what, on the basis of something you propose to me, you haven't been explicit enough. And I pointed out to them that the person they were presenting this idea to, who was very sophisticated, I said, despite his level of sophistication, when he hears the following, knowledge, experience, and resources, here's what he will not do. Wait a minute, if they got knowledge, experience, and resources, what that means is they're going to get this deal into the market a lot sooner. That will drive the share price. I'm a big shareholder. I'm going to make a lot of money in this transaction. Not to mention they explained it so cleanly and simply to me, I can confidently go take it in front of my board because I hate looking bad in front of my board. Okay, you guys got the deal. Well, who does that? The answer, nobody. You know what most people do? They hear what they hear, and that's all they hear, and now you don't sound any different than any of your competitors. So the challenge I put to you is this: being explicit. It's hard. Why is it hard? Because A, most people don't consciously think of it prior to going into a meeting, and B, even if they do think about it, people get a little bit gun shy about being explicit. There's a perception that perhaps I'm being too abrupt, too arrogant. Or the other gut check that people will have is maybe I'm being too condescending or patronizing. Isn't this obvious? And here's what I've learned. You will never, ever be too patronizing about being explicit about the so what. One of two outcomes will happen. One is the person you're presenting that argument to will say, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm thinking about. These people get the way I think. They're really credible to me. I like them. And number two is, that's not at all what I care about. I'm not worried about those things. Now, number one is definitely better than number two, but number two is not bad. You know why? Because if you have the wherewithal and the composure not to freak out when the guy tells you that's not what he cares about, it affords you the opportunity to actually ask, okay, well, what are your key issues? What do you care about? What is important to you? And then you'll learn. And again, those are things that strengthen your relationship and create an opportunity to truly differentiate. And here's the final point on being explicit about the so what. Most people will say that what makes a person a persuasive and influential presenter is that they have conviction in what they're talking about. So what is conviction? Conviction is not getting all evangelical and zealot-like. That's a bit hokey and contrived. To me, conviction is I truly believe in what I'm presenting, and I truly believe in the value it can bring to you if you were to implement the recommendation. So here's the interesting thing about being explicit. Only when people have true conviction are they even willing to be explicit. Because if you go back to my previous example, knowledge, experience, and resources, if you don't have a whole lot of conviction, you just throw those typical generic terms out, and there's almost this hope, well, that person will make all the right inferences I need them to make, and then we'll get the deal. But if you really have conviction in what you're saying, you'll probably say something like this. Look, we have the resources, the experience to get this deal done. So does every other firm that's coming in to talk to you. But one of the things that we do know is this. Presenting these types of things to a board is very challenging. And we are totally confident that our idea will stand up to the scrutiny of any of your board members, and you can feel totally confident about taking it to them. Now, if you don't truly believe in what you're saying, there's no way you're going to put yourself out there like that. And if we go back to that previous example, that's exactly what they did. And there's a lot of consternation amongst the team pitching, like, we can't say those things. Finally, the vice chairman, to his credit, said, look, this is one of the things we have to be prepared to do, and they did it. When I followed up with those guys after their pitch, here's what they told me. The pitch was going pretty well, and then came that conclusion, and they made that comment about the board being totally confident. And finally, the CEO really got engaged. He actually finally chimed in and said, you know what, I've got a couple members on my board that are going to have a real problem with this. And he started to go into all kinds of detail about his board and what's going to be needed for them to approve the deal. And they were then able to add true value by giving him meaningful, tangible advice that was going to help him pass this through the board. So had they not been explicit, that never would have come out. And also, had the story not turned out as good, I probably wouldn't be talking about it. So it is a good outcome. So here's my challenge to all of you. Prior to your next meeting, prior to your next presentation, prior to your next update, ask yourself from the perspective of your listener, what is their so what? How is what I'm telling them, if they were to agree with what I'm proposing, can help them or some stakeholder them look good, feel confident? And how confident are you to explicitly articulate that regardless of what the repercussions are? So in your next meeting, try it, Prepare for it, be ready for any outcomes, and you're going to see you're going to have a much more engaging discussion. Even if you don't fully convince the person, you're going to be far more credible to them because you are demonstrating conviction. So try those out. Let me know what you think by putting some comments in the section below. And more videos are coming, so subscribe. I look forward to talking to you soon.